All right, so I kind of been dreading this one, but we're going to get into it. This is the questions that all go around. Should I seed my lawn in the springtime? Because this is this one creates a lot of, I don't want to say this one creates a lot of conversation. We can just say that, and it gets to a point where people take sides on it. We're to the point where, I mean, as you guys know, or you're going to find out, I recommend against seeding in the spring. In most cases. And the reason that is, and we're going to go into it, but I see people every year, they seed in the spring, and then they'll go, look, Alan said you can't seed in the spring, and look, I did it, and I was successful. I'm like, well, wait a minute, bro. First, I never said you can't do anything. And, of course, you can. And, yeah, you can be successful, but I'm still just going to give you my opinion based on the best practice that I've seen from what where I'm at. I see a lot of DIYers. Arguably, I look at more DIY lawns than anybody on the internet, maybe anyone in the world. I mean, based on, some of the places that I'm at all the time, answering questions and looking and observing. So with that, I'm going to continue to give you what my best advice is, and that is not to seed your lawn in the spring. Now, I'm talking to cool season lawns here. Well, man, maybe we can go into seeding warm season lawns, because you do seed those in the late spring. But we're talking to cool season lawns right now: Kentucky Bluegrass, turf type tall fescue, perennial rye. And I'm going to tell you that Kentucky Bluegrass is the hardest one to do in general, period. Just seeding it all, Kentucky Bluegrass is the most difficult to seed. Ask anybody that's done it. It's a slower grower, slower to develop, and I don't care what kind of marketing is out there telling you that they've made it grow faster. It is slow, especially when you do a 100% Kentucky Bluegrass stand. So that's the hardest one. Turf type tall fescue, perennial rye, easier. Perennial rye, the easiest. But even in the springtime, they're all going to be difficult, and here's why. So we talk about temperature milestones, and we talk about crabgrass. Crabgrass is that annual grassy weed that germinates in the spring as soil temperatures cross 50, heading to 55, and it germinates all through the spring. And when soil temperatures get past 70, 75, that's when the window closes. You're in summer. You're not really in danger of more crabgrass germinating, but a lot can germinate during that spring time window, and you don't really know. I mean, unless you've lived in your house for a while, you may not know what's there, what's hiding. You have no idea. And so you come in and you put down grass seed. You put down your Kentucky Bluegrass that can take 15, 18, 21 days to germinate. There's miracle grass seed, Kentucky Bluegrass seed, that apparently germinates in 3 days now. I don't know how that happened. Somebody definitely changed nature there. But either way, it's slow. But that crabgrass seed is going to be germinating right alongside your beautiful grass seed that you paid a lot for, especially if you bought some of these elitist seeds that are being sold now. You paid a lot of money for that. And so with that crabgrass can and will, in a lot of spots, outcompete your good grass, especially around edges of sidewalks and things like that. It's going to outcompete there. It's born and bred to live 1 year, so it leaps off faster. It's the tortoise and the hare. Essentially, the crabgrass is the tortoise and your Kentucky Bluegrass is the hare. No, the other way around. The crabgrass is the hare and your Kentucky Bluegrass is the tortoise in a sense. And so that crabgrass will outcompete it in a lot of places, especially in hot zones. And so you're thinking about that. You cannot use pre-emergent, because this is the question people will ask. Can I use pre-emergent in the spring and seed? And the answer is, well, yes and no. The first way to answer that is traditional pre-emergents that we talk about, which are prodiamine, or dithiopyr would be the other active ingredient, but prodiamine, that will actually stop your good grass seed, your Kentucky Bluegrass, your perennial rye, your turf type tall fescue. It will kill that too. It'll stop that from germinating right alongside that crabgrass. So when you seed in the spring, you're ineligible now to use those tried and true crabgrass pre-emergents, because they will also kill your good grass seed. So now you say, what are my alternatives? Well, there is an alternative pre-emergent that you can use alongside of seeding, and that is the active ingredient Mesotrione. Now, Mesotrione is the active ingredient. Everybody knows tenacity. They think it's a miracle weed control, and it is a good weed control for a lot of things. It's misused a lot, and we're not going to get into that right now, but for pre-emergence of seeding, it is excellent. It is exactly what you recommend it for. Scott's has products on the market that have that included. They'll have starter fertilizer. I think they have one now that's got starter fertilizer, grass seed, and Mesotrione in it. It's like a triple. I mean, that's an excellent product. Mesotrione does work as a pre-emergence against crabgrass and I think dandelions and some other weeds too, which is, again, more of that positive for it being a pre-emergence. However, it doesn't have the lasting power. It doesn't have the staying power. It doesn't last as long as prodiamine. From my studies, and I haven't had extensive experience with it, okay? But from my experience, just what I've read and seen, you get 30, 35 days of really good pre-emergence control. Keep in mind in the spring, that's the rainy season for a lot of you. So a lot more rain in the spring than other times, which is going to bring the efficacy length down some, also soil type. But so it's good. It's a nice alternative if you have to seed in the spring, but it isn't something that I think would cover an entire crabgrass window. A crabgrass window can be, 65 days. 70 days even, right? When I lived in Northwest Indiana, our crabgrass window was right around 70 days, sometime around the beginning of March into about the middle of May. Is that 70 days? I should make sure before I put that out there. March to April to May, 60 days. So that's a crabgrass window, right? So that mesotrione wouldn't last that entire time. So you have to think about that. So what could happen is, sure, you get a good start. You're good. You use that mesotrione in the spring. You seed, things are going well, and then when that wears off, now the crabgrass comes in and rages and blows up your seeding. It just got delayed. That could happen. That is something that will happen in a lot of cases. So something to think about. Now we also want to think about. Let's think about those of you all that have seeded in the fall. What's the one thing that you're the most? Well, we'll go back to that. We'll go back to what you're the most impatient for. Here's the other thing. Post-emergent weed control. The other thing that's going to come to you if you seed in the spring, the other thing that's going to come to you sometime around Derby Day, maybe Cinco de Mayo, maybe sometime the last week of April, but sometime in that late April is going to be the major dandelion bloom. Every one of you across the Midwest and up through the East, you get whacked with dandelions. You've seen the lawns that are a sea of yellow, and then a week later, they're a sea of white puffballs. That's the seed heads. You know those lawns, right? You've seen those. Those lawns happen in late April, early May. Well, if that stuff's in your lawn, again, if you don't have history with your lawn, and maybe you are sitting on a dandelion field, well, here's the thing. If you're seeding in March or April, then, right come that time, that first week of May, that's when you're going to get hammered with those dandelions. Well, you're not going to be able to spray a post-emergent weed control because post-emergent weed controls typically want you to wait 2 mowings. And you may not be at 2 mowings at that point if you seeded in late March or early April and that dandelion bloom happens at the end of April. You see what I'm saying? You're like right on that cusp of, can I even spray dandelions? So now I have dandelions coming in, and go look at the razor sharp beaks on those bad boys. Look at how they spread out, man. Those bastards will really push your grass right out of the way because your grass is still weak. It still doesn't have the strength that it needs. And so now it's got dandelions just razoring all around it, dropping these puff balls, shading out the sun. That's a horrible way to have to start a life. And all because you chose to start, because you chose to seed in the spring. Now, the other thing you have is that late frost freeze. This is the other challenge that you have. We face the opposite thing when we seed in the fall, and we have to get done early so we have plenty of time to handle the first frost that comes in the fall. But in the spring, you could have the late one that comes in. So when are you going to seed? Are you going to seed in the middle of March, late March, April? You guys everywhere. I don't care if you live in West Virginia. I don't care if you live in definitely if you live in northern Wisconsin, you have had a late frost freeze. I'm talking like April 15th. I know you have. And so there's a chance there. There's a chance you take there that all that hard work that you went to in the spring, all that money you spent, bam, whacks it right out, right? So that's another thing to think about. Now let's go back to that thing I was saying that you're impatient about. And you guys know this that have seeded in the fall. The thing you can't stand the most is waiting to mow. Now, once again, let me just say something. You guys know I'm a fan of the seed into a current lawn, aerate and seed into the lawn. I'm not a fan of the lawn burn down. It's one of those things that I don't recommend either. I know there are times when it has to be done, so I'm not like against it. It's nothing like that. I get way too passionate about this stuff sometimes. It's just freaking grass, y'all. I just like talking about it a lot and in this way. But I'm a fan of that seeding into a current lawn, and that would go in the spring too. So with that in mind, you have to think about you're going to want to mow because you want to get out and do that, especially in the spring. If you think about the growth chart, we think about the growth curves. We have the 2 camel humps for cool season lawns. Spring is actually the bigger top growth time than the fall. Fall's more rooting, but the spring overall is a bigger time. So now you got to think your existing grass is really raging in the spring, but you can't get out and mow because you just seeded and you got baby grass hanging up under there and you don't want to trample it. So, man, what is your lawn really going to look like in the spring? Because you do have to wait a couple of weeks to mow. And with the higher growth spurt in the spring, which is the spring is, if you look at that growth curve we talk about, you are really going to have to wait to mow. So I mean, there's all of these things to consider. I took a bunch of notes. I really kind of looked into this. You can see I'm trying to talk you out of it. You know, one other thing that will happen is that folks who seeded in the fall, they are not patient enough. And so coming into spring, they think their fall seeding didn't do well enough, and they are going to have to reseed in the spring. You see what I'm saying? What I want you to do is wait. I want you to give that fall seeding a chance to thicken up. I want you to start pushing it with fertilizer, with nitrogen, and with a lot of mowing, and let it fatten itself up. You don't want to overcrowd it by immediately bombing it with seed again in the spring and just really putting in more competition. So now you probably have some existing grass that's mature grass. And then you also have some of that new grass that's in there that's coming into its college years, and now you just put in baby grass, and you have all of that living together and competing for a root system. That just doesn't sound right. What I think would be better is to work on that college grass. Let's let that college grass turn into a pro. Let's really develop it out. Whether we need to bulk it up, right? Let's put it on a bulking session. Enough good things going at that age. We can really, really, really start bulking it up, especially with the spring. That's going to be helping us out with mild temperatures, with rain, right? We are really going to have a chance to bulk that grass up. So I would not seed in the spring if you seeded last fall. I would go on a bulking cycle. So that's just another piece of that whole spring seeding thing. Now, let me just go back to this and say, I realize there's times when you're going to want to seed in the spring, and some of you might just want to do it for the challenge. And if that's you, I respect that. I think that's awesome. Do it for the challenge. Go for it. Don't let me stop you. I'm just trying to help those folks out that are looking for the way. They're like, I just want to give me the way that gives me the best chance for success. I would say my strategy always is, and I'll put it in a nutshell, is spring you play defense and offense. The defense is with pre-emergent weed control to keep crabgrass out. And again, this is for warm and cool season. And then also your other piece of your defense is a lot of mowing, because mowing will keep weeds out more than you think. And then also we're going to go on offense. We're going to go on a bulking session. We're going to push the lawn to thicken up what's there. Even if you think you have a terrible lawn, the terrible lawn that you have is the lawn that has survived all of the neglect from the previous owners or previous years or whatever it is, right? So that's going to be the strongest grass. So let's see what happens if we actually start caring for it, since it survived in these terrible conditions all these years. So what we do is, the other thing we're going to do is we're going to give it a year where it doesn't have to compete with crabgrass by putting in a pre-emergent. So pre-emergent's there, lots of mowing to keep weeds out, to help keep weeds out, lots of fertilizer to really bulk up the existing grass that is there. And then we can even go into spot spraying some weeds if you want to. We can get into, obviously in the summer, we're concerned about our watering. I don't even care about disease the first year. Forget that. Insects, forget that. Okay, it's okay. Keep moving forward with those basics. And then when you get to the fall, you reassess, and that's when you can throw in your grass seed, and that's when you can move into a more offensive type relationship with the lawn, knowing what you were able to accomplish just with some of the basics. So